good evening, wherever you are. My name is Hassan Salam. I'm the chair of the Egyptian Representative Committee of the Royal College in Egypt. And I would like to welcome you all to this webinar workshop, which is entitled the BJOG Authors and Peer Reviewers webinar, which is jointly hosted by the Egyptian Representative Committee of the College in collaboration with the Egyptian Society for Gynecology and Obstetrics. I want to welcome you and also welcome our very distinguished speakers who have taken out of their time to share with us their vast experience and their knowledge in this particular area. As the Egyptian Representative Committee, we are a committee of 9 people, 5 fellows and 4 members. As you can see them, Professor Gasib Bishri, Abigit Sarhan, Ahmed Zakaria, Hussein Abu al-Makarim, and 4 members, Dr. Wafa Benjamin, who is with us today, Dr. Ahmed Mustafa, Miriam al-Halawani, and Dr. Samih Salama. We work in collaboration with the RCOG Egypt Liaison Committee, headed these days by Professor Muhammad Al-Fattah, who is a professor of urogynecology in Aberdeen, and which used to be headed by Dr. Sharif Al-Fattah, who is one of our distinguished speakers today. Now, this webinar is organized by the officers of BJOG. BJOG, as you know, is an international journal of obstetrics and gynecology, which was formerly known as the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, changing its name in 2001. It started as the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology of the British Empire. And as you can see, it started in 1902. And this is one of the oldest journals in obstetrics and gynecology. And in fact, it is the first English-speaking journal in obstetrics and gynecology. As you can see, the General Medical Journal started in 1811 by the New England Journal of Medicine, then the Lancet in 1833, British Medical Journal, 1839, then Nature, and then Science. But in journals of obstetrics and gynecology, the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology of the British Empire was only preceded by the German journal Archiv für Gynaecologie, which is, of course, in German. It is much older than the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the Great Journal, and the Greek Journal known as Obstetrics and Gynecology. Now, of course, I published in the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and I share the journal. It is our journal. It is the journal of the official journal of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists. It also publishes many of the guidelines of the college, as you can see here. And with this, I would like to introduce our distinguished speakers, starting with Professor Philip Steer. Professor Philip Steer, who is the emeritus editor of BJOG. He's emeritus professor of obstetrics at Imperial College London, at the Academic Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Chelsea and Westminster Hospitals. And he was going to talk to us about how to structure a view and support tools, conflicts of interest, and confidentiality. We will welcome him. He's going to join us after 15 minutes as he's involved in another activity just now. Dr. Michael March also is the current editor-in-chief of BJOG. He's a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist at King's College Hospital, London, my alma mater, and honorary senior lecturer at King's School of Medicine. He's also the UK representative for the FIGO Ethics Committee and past honorary senior lecturer at the Institute of Psychiatry, London, across the road from King's. Professor Aristeo Papageorgiou is professor in obstetric and fetal medicine at St. George's Healthcare NHS Trust in London, and at the same time, he's clinical research director of the Oxford Maternal and Perinatal Health Institute at the Nuffield Department of Obstetric Gynecology in beautiful Oxford in England. I don't know how he keeps moving from one place to the other. He is the BJOG Deputy Editor-in-Chief, and today he's going to talk to us about the essential author resources and how to improve your paper. We thank him and welcome him very much. I would like also to welcome Dr. Patrick Chien, who is the Deputy Editor-in-Chief also of BJOG, who is consultant and honorary senior lecturer in obstetrics and gynecology at Ninewells Hospital and Medical School in Dundee, beautiful Scotland, who is going to give us a talk on why should you review for a journal, what to consider before accepting an invitation to review. And I would also like to welcome and thank Dr. Sharif Al-Fattah, who is the person who was behind the organization of all this and other activities. Dr. Shifa Fattah is the scientific editor of BJOG. He's consultant in obstetric and fetal medicine and Southmead Hospital in Bristol, UK, an honorary senior lecturer, University of Bristol. And as I said, he's the former chair of the Liaison Committee, Egypt UK Liaison Committee, and also the former RCOG MTI scheme lead. He's going to talk to us about value added, the value in our paper for publication. And from Cairo, I would like to welcome Professor Mohammed Mumtaz. Professor Mumtaz, we all know him. He's the past chair of obstetric gynecology in Cairo University and the vice president of the Egyptian Society for Gynecology and Obstetrics. He's also our representative in FIGO, and he's going to moderate the first part of this session with Professor Rasha Kamel. And also, I would like to welcome and thank Professor Amr Nouri, my predecessor. As you all know, he started all these activities. He's a professor in obstetrics and gynecology at Cairo University at the National Laser Institute. He's a former chair of the committee, as I say, and he's also a board member and honorary treasurer of the Egyptian Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And he's going to moderate the second part with Dr. Wafa Benjamin. And from Cairo also, I want to welcome and thank Professor Rasha Kamel, who is professor in obstetric gynecology again at Cairo University. She's a senior consultant at the maternal fetal medicine unit in Qasr Al Aini Hospital of Cairo University. And she's also an ambassador of the International Society of Ultrasound in Obstetric Gynecology in the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa region, who is going to moderate the first part of the webinar with Professor Mumtaz. And from Cairo, Dr. Wafa Benjamin, who is a consultant in obstetric gynecology at the General Organization for Teaching Hospitals and Institutes. She's a member of the advisory board of the Egyptian Fellowship Program in Obstetric Gynecology, member, and more importantly, the treasurer of our committee, the International Committee for the Royal College in Egypt. And with this, I want to thank them again and welcome them tonight. And please, for the audience, could you please put your questions in the question answer section, not in the chat section, if possible. And if you like, you may like to add your name and where you come from, because I understand that we have at least 1,300 registrations from some 50 countries. And finally, and not importantly, very importantly, I would like to thank Merck Pharmaceuticals for supporting this activity and other activities. And with this, I cede my microphone and video to Professor Mohammed Mumtaz and Professor Rasha Kamel to moderate the first part of this webinar. Professor Mumtaz.
Thank you, Professor Salam. It gives me a great pleasure to be here. It's my second time to be part of the moderators of the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the Egyptian Liaison Committee and the Egyptian Society of Gynecology and Obstetrics. And of course, the topic or the theme of today, which is research, I think it's very, very important nowadays with a lot of debate and discussions about integrity of research, about how to be able to succeed. And of course, the word publish or die is still valid in many countries, and it's starting to be also in many universities in Egypt. If you want to be promoted to assistant professor or professor, you should publish in international journals. And now it's becoming more and more difficult. So I think we are all interested in learning what are the steps and what are the needs for this kind of work. Our first speaker is Dr. Michael Marsh. He will give us a presentation about publication ethics. He is the British Journal of Gynecology editor-in-chief. He is a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist and honorary senior lecturer at King's College Hospital, London. He is the UK representative for the FIGO Ethics Committee. He is past honorary senior lecturer at the Institute of Psychiatry, London, UK. He will not be able to join us live, so I think the presentation will be recorded. And at the end, if you have any questions, please do put them in the question section. And I think Dr. Shen will be able to reply these questions and answer them. So please, can you start the presentation?
Thank you very much for asking the BJOG team to be involved in this meeting. And I'm going to start things off firstly with the very important topic of publication ethics. By the end of this talk, I hope you'll be able to list the types of scientific misconduct and questionable practice, explain what each type involves, explain the repercussions if these are identified, and explain, most importantly, how they can be. Now, one can divide publication ethics into two categories, the most serious being scientific misconduct and the less serious, perhaps questionable practice. So within scientific misconduct, this includes undeclared conflicts of interest, ghost or guest authorship, plagiarism, duplicate publication, data fabrication, or the absence of informed consent or ethics approval. And questionable practice, a less egregious deviation from publication ethics, includes salami publication, data falsification, and misuse of the registration process. Scientific misconduct can be defined as serious deviation from accepted practices of the relevant research community, committed intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, and proven, most importantly, by a preponderance of evidence. And of course, these sort of cases do get a lot of media attention when they occur. How common are scientific misconduct and questionable practice? Well, there are various ways of looking at this. One can look at the number of retracted articles, although these usually represent a small proportion of the cases where there may be ethical misdeeds. And one can see certainly that the number of retracted articles has increased steadily over the last 20 years or so, and they include as causes fraud, suspected fraud, error, plagiarism, and duplicate publication. One can also look at expressions of concern, and these are things that are published by journals saying that there are some concerns about the validity of a paper, of a data set, and these are under investigation. And about 25% of these lead to eventual retraction. And one can see that the number of expressions of concern have gone up certainly over the last decade or so. We recently published a paper looking solely at retractions in obstetrics and gynecology, and you can see that this has been steadily increasing. This is a study from 85 right to 2018. And the median time of publication to retraction is about 2 years, so there's often a delay in retracting such papers. Group also looked in detail at the types of papers. It looked like gynecological oncology papers were rather overrepresented, although that may be because the authors were mainly gynaecologists. But you can see obstetrics and gynecology also make up quite large proportions of those papers that were retracted. No particular study design is exempt from the possibility of retraction. So randomized controlled trials, prospective studies, retrospective studies, all represent. And these are the reasons for retraction. And you can see, as in the previous slide, plagiarism, errors in the data, and fabrication and falsified data are quite well represented. What's very unfortunate is no reason was provided in some 17% of cases. And of course, there's an enormous difference between an error in the data and data fabrication. So it is unfortunate that, that some journals don't make it clear why a paper may be retracted. Looking at the numbers of authors involved in retracted, and these are the first authors or the senior authors, you can see for the majority of papers that only one paper is retracted by one particular journal relating to one particular author. So in other words, the majority of cases over this long time period, one author made, shall we say, one error on one occasion. And there are only a small number of authors where several papers, in this